1945, at 8:15 in the morning, a crew of American airmen dropped a nuclear bomb on the Japanese city of Hiroshima. The bomb was nicknamed Little Boy. A few days later, airmen made another run and dropped a bomb called Fat Man on the city of Nagasaki. Although the bombs contributed to the eventual ending of World War II and Japan's surrender, the devastation was unmatched in human history. According to historians, the two bombs resulted in the immediate or eventual death of 150 to 250,000 Japanese men, women, and children. In the years following the war, the Japanese people had to grapple with what had happened. After being led by their leaders into a brutal worldwide conflict, their enemies had used 2 nuclear bombs to kill up to 250,000 of their countrymen, permanently scarring their country and their culture. How does a country come to grips with that? How do they express their anger, their guilt, their loss, and their confusion? One man, Ishiro Honda, had an idea. Honda was a filmmaker. He understood that movies are a communal medium which allow large groups of people to feel and think together, often about important things. So, in 1954, 8 years after the bomb dropped, Honda used his camera to tell a story that he thought might help the Japanese people express their grief, pain, hopes, and fears. It was the story of a peace-loving Japanese people that were being attacked by a hideous monster from the sea. This monster lived quietly on the ocean floor and had for centuries. Nuclear bomb tests in the Pacific Ocean, however, had woke up the monster, and had even given him special devastating powers, like radioactive fire breath, with which he terrorized the Japanese coastline. The monster had the head of a lizard, a muscular torso, powerful legs, a tall tail like a T-Rex, and sharp glowing fins like a stegosaurus. He was like a god, but also like a lizard. The Japanese called him Gojira, others called him Godzilla. For decades, the Japanese people found a cathartic release in the story of Godzilla and its, count them, 28 sequels. Godzilla even went global with countless comic books and movie knockoffs, including one starring Matthew Broderick in the 90s, and another one to be released next year. The lizard god even earned a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. What's interesting, though, is that now, while most of the world knows about Godzilla as the iconic giant sea lizard, Japan knows he is so much more. He is a metaphor for the nuclear monster that had devastated their country and could again at any time. It's why the Fukushima nuclear disaster is such a problem for them, because they know they've been through this before. Now, why am I telling you this? What's the point with this little cinematic history lesson? My point is that monster movies are rarely just monster movies. The monsters are never just monsters. They represent something. Monster movies are cultural expressions of our hopes and fears in a very dangerous world. Which brings us to our series. We were wrapping up this morning our current series called Rooftop at the Movies, and during the series we've been discussing some summer blockbusters. Our goal during this series has been to engage our culture a bit more than Christians are inclined to. What do movies like The Lone Ranger, The Way, Way Back, Despicable Me tell us about the world we live in? How should Christians think about and respond to these movies and their messages? And that's what we've been doing during this series. I don't want to get off track, but as we wrap up this series, I want to thank you for putting up with it, if even just for my sake. As a movie buff, I know this series has been a good chance for me to scratch my movie itch, but far from just scratching an itch, this series sort of represents the church I want Rooftop to be. A church that isn't afraid to wade directly into the culture in which we live and breathe. I've even started making a list of other related series that do kind of the same thing by taking us into the world we live in. Rooftop reads the bestseller list. Rooftop watches the news. Rooftop listens to the top 40. I've even thought of extending the series a few more weeks because there's so many movies we didn't get to, like, that One Direction movie or Smurfs 2. Instant classics, those films. Don't you want to know what Gargamel has to teach us about life and faith? You might be surprised. In the end, though, it's probably good we're moving on back into our study of John, which we're going to get back to next week. There will be plenty of time to consider Smurfs 2 or not, but for now, we've got one more movie to discuss in the series. That would be the apocalyptic science fiction monster versus robots movie Pacific Rim. Now, if you haven't seen Pacific Rim, let me tell you about it without spoiling the ending, because you made it clear to me last week how much you hate when I do that. Pacific Rim is set in the Pacific Theater in the 2020s. As you saw in the preview, huge giant monsters begin appearing in the Pacific Ocean, terrorizing surrounding cities. These monsters are called kaiju, which is Japanese for strange creature. It's discovered that the monsters are not coming from the sea, but actually from a mysterious intergalactic portal at the bottom of the ocean. To fend off these attacks, the nations of the world joined together to develop giant kaiju-sized robots. These robots, called Jeagers, are piloted by teams of like-minded warriors with martial arts training. For a while, the Jeagers are doing pretty well. Even though entire cities get destroyed in the process, the kaiju are no match for the technical weaponry of the robots. But then, the kaiju come in bigger and more powerful forms. They also start arriving more frequently. Jaegers start going down. What's going to happen? Is humanity going to survive? Can the Jaegers match the power of the kaijus? I don't want to spoil anything for you, so I'll let you watch the movie, or you could just use your brains to figure out how it ends. The movie was written by Travis Beacham and was directed by Guillermo del Toro. Now, del Toro has been directing smaller, under-the-radar horror and fantasy films for years, but he finally got his big chance with this one. And at the box office, the movie did very well. It only had average returns here in the United States, if you consider $100 million average. But it was a juggernaut internationally, making over $400 million. For the most part, critics liked it by an average about 3-1. Critics that didn't like it thought the plot was thin and the cast was weak, both of which were true. Tom Cruise was originally scheduled to be in it, but he couldn't work it out with his schedule, so we get some other guy. Critics that did like it said mostly what my kids said after they saw it: wow, that was awesome. People who liked it didn't watch it for plot or drama. They just wanted to see giant monsters battle giant robots. Now, when it comes to what the movie is about, Del Toro is not elusive. He has said, quite simply, that the movie is about togetherness. It's a morality tale about community. In the story, the first Jaegers that were developed were made to be piloted by single fighters who ride in the robot's head and use their brains to control the robot's movements. However, the robots were so sophisticated and demanding that the pilots couldn't handle the neural load, whatever that is. They died from brain stress, whatever that is. So the Jaegers were outfitted to be piloted together by 2 or 3 pilots, and with the help of only in the movie's technology, these pilots mind meld with each other, sharing the neural load. Now, according to the director, this is the point of the film, that we stand no chance as a civilization unless we find a way to work through our barriers and differences and learn to fight as one. As Del Toro himself said in an interview, we're all together in the same robot. Either we get along or we die. As he continues, that guy you were beating the bleep out of 10 minutes ago, that's the guy you have to work with 5 minutes later. That's life. We can only be complete when we work together. Now, you know as well as I do that this is a theme that Christians need to talk about. Christians have an awful lot to learn, even from the world, about togetherness. And this is a common theme in Scripture. Paul writes to the Romans, "May God give you a spirit of unity among yourselves as you follow Christ Jesus, so that with one heart and one mouth you may glorify the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ." God's vision for his people is that we'd be united in mind and heart, working together and praising God. More than anybody else, we need to learn that we're all in the same robot. We need to learn that the other Christians we were beating the bleep out of 10 minutes ago or saying rude things about from the pulpit are the ones we're going to have to work with in 5 minutes. I think about this when I get into conflicts or arguments with Christian people. I realize, I'm going to have to spend eternity with these people. So I might as well try to get along here on earth because I'm going to have to see them like forever. Besides which, the enemies we face in life are too great to fight by ourselves. In the movie, humanity comes together out of necessity. They have to work together because they're facing enemies more powerful than anything they had ever conceived. Only by joining forces did they stand a chance. The same is true for us. Our enemies are too great to defeat by ourselves. The devil, the world, sickness, death, family problems. We all have enemies. We all have kaiju. Creatures too big for us to take on alone. Paul makes the same point in the book of Philippians. He tells the church to stand firm in one spirit, contending as one man for the sake of the gospel, without being frightened in any way by those who oppose you. This is a sign to your opponents. that they will be destroyed, but you will be saved. Stand firm in one spirit, he writes, contending as one man for the sake of the gospel, without being frightened in any way by those who oppose you. This is a sign to your opponents that they will be destroyed, but you will be saved. Our unity and our togetherness are what gives the church hope and what terrifies the devil. The devil is not terrified by us as individuals. It is when we stand firm in one spirit when he gets nervous. I've made this point before, but it reminds me of Voltron. You know Voltron. Dorks unite. Another Japanese-inspired kids' cartoon from the 80s. Voltron is a giant robot made of 5 smaller robot lions. On their own, they are powerful but not threatening. Together, they are deadly. Not that the church should be deadly, but we should definitely be together. In Pacific Rim, one of the characters points out that the robots fight as hard as the bond between the controllers. As he says, the deeper the bond, the better we fight. In other words, if the controllers have a high level of compatibility, the robot is stronger and faster, but if there's conflict and ignorance, they slow down. That's why a team of not-so-powerful fighters proves to be the toughest Jaeger in the fleet, because they have a powerful bond. I actually like this movie because it reminds me of our church. Individually, we are not incredibly impressive. No offense. But we are a community that loves each other. We are a community that shares with each other. We are a community that challenges each other and confesses to each other and serves each other. The deeper the bond, the harder we fight. We suffer together. We celebrate together. We have very far to go. But we have potential as a congregation, not because we are impressive as individuals, but because we know we're in the same robot. Fighting monsters too big for us to handle on our own, which leads to a question. What's your kaiju? What's the enemy that's too big for you to handle by yourself? Your addiction to sin, your emotional problems, your family dysfunction, your joblessness, your grief. What's your monster? And are you enough a part of God's robot to tackle it together? Are you involved enough around here to have God's people help you in the struggle? Are you growing in intimacy with the people around you? Are you using your gifts to serve others in the robot? Or are you off trying to handle your problems by yourself, but the neural load is going to be too much? That's the point of the movie, that our only hope is by working together, and that's all true. But at this point, I have to make one huge, gigantic, kaiju-sized caveat. The lesson of the movie that together we can vanquish our enemies is true up to a point. But after that point, it becomes complete hogwash. The lesson in the movie that together we can vanquish our enemies is true to a point, but up to a point, it becomes a complete lie. Here's what I mean. This might get a little heady, but I believe in you. Ready? Okay, 3 of you are. You see, every movie director and every screenwriter has what's called a worldview. A worldview is exactly what it sounds like. It's a way of viewing the world. Everybody looks at the world in a certain way, and that perspective affects how we perceive what's going on. People can have political worldviews, like conservative or liberal, socialist or libertarian. People can have religious worldviews, like atheistic or trinitarian or pantheistic. People can have emotional worldviews, like positive or negative, glass half full, glass half empty. These worldviews affect how we see the world, and they are built into us over many years as a result of upbringing by parents and mentors, education, social context, the country in which we live and grow. Every movie has a worldview. Pacific Rim, Despicable Me 2, My Little Pony Rides Again, every movie. And Pacific Rim, for all its excitement and important lessons on togetherness, has a worldview that Christians, by definition, have to reject. You see, the lesson of the movie is that together we can defeat our enemies. The word used to describe this worldview is humanism. Humanism celebrates the potential and abilities of the human race. Humanism believes that, sure, people make mistakes, don't we all? But that on a whole, we're a pretty good species who might just make something of ourselves when we grow up. And Pacific Rim is bathed in humanism. When monsters threaten the globe, all of humanity drops their conflict and begins magically working together instantly to solve the crisis. This is not World War Z, when civilization fractures at the onslaught. This is humanity's finest hour. And at several key moments in the dialogue, the movie's humanism bleeds right through. For example, When one of the pilots describes the power of the Jaegers, he says this: "There are things you can't fight, acts of God. You see a hurricane coming, you get out of the way. But when you're in a Jaeger, you can finally fight the hurricane, you can win." And as you saw in the preview, when the kaiju threat is at its worst, the pilots band together behind their leader who announces, "Today, what are we going to do? We're going to cancel the apocalypse." Really? Canceling the apocalypse. Stopping a hurricane. As I watched the movie, I couldn't help but think, no, we're not. An alien civilization whose members are gigantic titans with incredible powers that has the ability to arrive to our planet through a portal in the ocean floor. Yeah, we're toast. But almost every modern sci-fi movie tells the same incredible humanistic story that somehow, humans can defeat alien invaders that have enough technology to travel to our planet but can't handle our sticks and stones. It's like that old Will Smith movie, Independence Day. Remember Independence Day? Humanity is under attack by aliens, but Jeff Goldblum realizes that we can defeat the aliens. How do we do it? Remember? With a computer virus. Those aliens never saw it coming. The most brilliant, stupidest aliens in the universe. This is the worldview of Pacific Rim. We see it especially in the movie's glorification of technology. These robots are man-made technological wonders. They are our crowning achievement as a species. And that's what the movie is really all about. See what technological marvels we can do together. But what's really interesting and ironic about this is that Guillermo del Toro made the movie as a sort of homage to the great kaiju films of the past, especially the first one, which was Godzilla. But Godzilla does not celebrate human technology. In Godzilla, it was humanity's technology that awoke the monster. It was the nuclear tests which gave the monster its terrible powers. The monster wasn't really Godzilla, but the nuclear bomb that we had made. So Del Toro writes a movie like Godzilla, but completely misses the point. Godzilla is a story of what terrible things we have done. Pacific Rim is a tale about what glorious things we can do. Now, Pacific Rim is a humanist tale because Guillermo del Toro is a humanist. He is a lapsed Catholic who says he mercifully left the church years ago. When asked in an interview about his religious beliefs, he said, "I believe in man. I believe in mankind as the worst and the best thing that has happened to this world." That is textbook humanism. But I'm not telling you this to get Del Toro in trouble. He can think whatever he wants. He can make whatever movies he wants. My point here is that an awful lot of people, including us, like the movie not just because it has monsters and robots. We like the movie because we're closet humanists. We haven't met a crisis we can't solve. If we solve it together, we believe in what we can do as people, as a species. We sent a man to the moon. We split the atom. We defeated polio. But for every human success, there are 20 failures. Even our greatest technological successes lead to terrible consequences. We discovered nuclear power only to turn it into a bomb. We invented smartphones, and now millions of people die every year while using their phone while driving. History is filled with examples of humanity working together to try to solve our problems, but making a bigger mess in the process. Take the United Nations. After World War II, the governments of the world decided to come together in solidarity to create a place where we could prevent conflict and solve our greatest problems. And to be sure, the UN does great good. But it has also had tremendous failures when the greatest minds of the world can't agree to do anything. Syria, Kosovo, Middle East terrorism, Darfur, Sri Lanka, communist oppression. This is what happens when we try to work together. But again, I'm not just talking about the UN, I'm talking about you and I. Because the international community has the same problem we do. The problem is that we have way too high an opinion of our own abilities and importance. I remember when we first got to St. Louis years ago to start this church, I was young, ambitious. I was a young, ambitious humanist. Really. who believed in his own abilities and destiny. We had visions and dreams for the church and growth charts and attendance expectations. Our goal was to double in a couple years and plant more churches and really to change the religious landscape in St. Louis. That was the goal. Change the religious landscape in St. Louis. Within 3 Sundays of our first service, I realized this was not going to go to plan. I was not the leader I thought I was. Our destiny was not at all guaranteed, no matter how hard we worked together. I remember this when I got married. I had read the books. I had listened to the sermons about how to make marriage work. Then I got married. No matter how hard we tried to work together, we kept running into walls. I remember this when I had kids. I was prepared. I was compassionate. I was full of love and patience. Then I had kids. Every Christian goes through this, really, when they realize they don't know nearly as much as they thought they did. Take Job. Maybe you know Job from the Old Testament. Job was having a particularly difficult day, with God allowing the devil to strip him of his family, his health, his livelihood. Job starts complaining to God that what's happening to him is wrong, it's not fair, it doesn't make sense. God speaks to him from the sky and reminds him, oh, I forgot to tell you, you're only a man. And it's not a compliment. He says, who is this that darkens my counsel without knowledge? Brace yourself like a man. I will question you. You will answer me. Where were you when I laid the earth's foundation? Tell me if you understand. Who marked off its dimensions? Surely you know. Can you bind the beautiful Pleiades? Can you loose the cords of Orion? Can you bring forth the constellations in their seasons? Can you pull in the Leviathan? Massive sea creature. Can you pull in the Leviathan with a fishhook or tie down his tongue with a rope? Can you put a cord through his nose or pierce his jaw with a hook? Will he keep begging you for mercy? Will he speak to you with gentle words? Will he make an agreement with you for you to take him as your slave for life? One Christian commentator recalled those words after the movie, and I think they're appropriate. We are so arrogant to think that we can handle Leviathans and monsters when we work together. No, we can't. There are some monsters that teamwork and expertise can't defeat. Even my family is learning this. You might know we're going through a medical crisis that has doctors around the country stumped. It's amazing to think that with today's medical technology and instrumentation, we can't even identify a disease. The smartest doctors in the country don't even know what to call it, let alone how to cure it. I thought we were past this part of human history. But we aren't. We never will be. For every disease we cure, new ones will surface. For every advance we make, new monsters will arrive. Because we're sinful people living in a sinful world. People can't stop hurricanes. People can't stop monsters. But God can. And this is the difference between the Christian worldview and that of Pacific Rim. Pacific Rim celebrates what we can do as a people when we band together. Christianity knows that bad things tend to happen when we band together, unless God is our bond. Pacific Rim envisions what we can accomplish if we operate as one mind in the body of a robot. Christianity envisions what we can accomplish if we submit to Christ, who is the head of the body, the robot. On our own, we have no hope against the kaiju, let alone ourselves. Our hope is in God. Take the greatest kaiju humanity has ever faced, sin and death. There is no kaiju more threatening than sin and death. Sin and death are powerful and vicious. It has a head like a lizard, a powerful torso, giant legs, a tail like a T-Rex, sharp fins like a stegosaurus. Plus, sin and death have that radioactive fire breath that can destroy us with one exhale. Humanity, for as long as we have existed, has been trying to join together with all our technological wizardry to destroy sin and death. But people still sin, and people still die. We cannot defeat the monster. Jesus did, though. Using his powers of life and love, he lived a life of perfect holiness. When the kaiju of death had him in its grip, he flashed his sword and defeated death with one fell swoop. We didn't do that, he did. And the same is true for all the kaiju we face in life: death, sin, addictions, fear, dysfunction, loneliness. Even if we work together, we have no hope. But in Christ we do. Jesus can heal sickness. Jesus can cleanse us of sin. Jesus can fix marriages. Jesus can overcome death. You might think these are battles that we can win if we fight together, but Christians know they are not. As the psalmist wrote so long ago, some trust in chariots, some in horses. I would add, some trust in the government and the United Nations. Some trust in robots and technology. Some trust in doctors and experts. But we trust in the name of the Lord our God. They are brought to their knees and fall, but we rise up and stand firm, not because of who we are, but because of who He is. Do you believe that? Do you believe that God alone is your hope and strength? Here at Rooftop, that's exactly what we believe. If you want to meet that God who alone can defeat your monsters, do something about it. Talk to a leader. Turn in your prayer request. Send me an email. Ask him to help you right now in your seats. Don't head out of the building to fight monsters by yourself. You know, you really know, you stand no chance against.